All right, guys, how we all doing today? I hope everyone had a great weekend. We're getting into lesson 4 of economics today, looking at why nations trade. Okay, so we're going to be building off of everything you've learned through lessons 1 through 3, and getting more into globalized trade and nations working together through importing and exporting goods. A lot of this lesson will be focused on how trade has changed over the years, and we know that with trade getting more abundant in this day and age, that leads to more interdependence, which is what you guys talked about last week in our introduction to economics, and it also leads to a more globalized economy. So your agenda today, we're going to start with a warm up. Okay, just something quick, think about it, and then we'll move on from there. We'll read through our big idea card, we'll read through our word cards, and then we'll get into our lesson, which you guys will have a handout to go off of with that. Hopefully you were able to print that out. If you didn't get the handout printed out, like always, no worries, just grab a couple pieces of paper, pen or pencil, and you'll be good to go. We'll have the questions up on the screen as we go through it. After our lesson, you guys are going to work on an activity looking at trade data from the year 2013. And this data is linked to your Google survey. So the questions from that activity are also on your Google survey. And that's how we're going to kind of see where you guys are with how nations trade and why nations trade. Lastly, there's a really cool extension on Levi Jeans, and we'll be talking about jeans today, and Levi being originally an American company. This extension is going to look at where Levi jeans are made today, and it just gives you a really cool visual looking at some maps and mapping it out for us. So that's your lesson today. Here we go. Let's start with our warm-up. We've used this term globalization throughout the school year. So I'd like you guys to think back. When we hear the term globalization, what does that mean to us? I'll give you maybe 15 to 20 seconds to come up with just an idea. Globalization. What does that mean? All right, did we come up with something? To me, when I think of globalization, I think of a more connected world. Okay, and we talked about that earlier in the school year, that as people began migrating around the world and as populations began to grow, we saw more and more people be connected through communication and transportation. Now we're going to look at how people are more connected and the world's more connected through global trade, because global trade is what kind of led us into becoming more connected in the first place. So let's get our handouts out here. Economics lesson 4, why do countries trade? And you'll see the big graphic here is showing us that specialization leads to trade, which leads to interdependence. And so when we first look at this word specialization, we're thinking about countries specializing in specific goods. They use their resources within that country to produce some sort of good that they can then trade out to other countries around the world, and that leads to more interdependence, more countries depending on one another. Okay, hold up. Let's talk about trade here for a second. When I think about the word trade, or I think about myself in middle school, when I heard the word trade or trading, I was like, oh yeah, lunchtime. You've got a cookie. I've got a bag of chips. I want your cookie. You want my chips. So let's make a deal here. And that was trading, a good for a good. Now, the trade that we're talking about today is not countries trading goods with other countries, but rather countries buying goods, specifically the goods that they want or need, and selling their own goods to other countries. So when you hear the word trade today, keep in mind that we're really talking about using money to buy those goods or selling those goods for money, not a good for a good. Okay, so let's get into our big idea card. We have 6 big ideas for this lesson. Bullet point number 1, countries trade with each other for the same reasons people trade with each other. They do not have the resources or capability to satisfy their own needs and wants. Bullet point 2, countries have been trading with each other for thousands of years because trade benefits trading partners. Bullet point 3, improvements in communication and transportation have greatly changed global trade. Bullet point 4, over time, the speed, volume, geographic range, diversity, and complexity of global trade has increased. Bullet point 5, countries specialize in the goods that they can produce most efficiently and trade to get other goods they want or need. And bullet point 6, specialization and trade make the countries of the world interdependent. Please flip to the next couple pages. We'll look at your word cards, and then if you don't have the handout, I'll give you guys an opportunity to pause while looking at the questions so you can copy those down on a separate piece of paper. Okay, word card 27, integration, combining parts so that they work together. Example, the integration of communication and transportation systems across the planet has made global trade possible. 28, global trade. The exchange of goods or services between individuals, organizations, or governments of different nations. Example, many nations of the world participate in global or international trade. 29, currency, money, a medium of exchange. Example, each country has its own type of currency. 30, exchange rate, an amount of domestic currency compared to an equivalent amount of foreign currency. Example, the exchange rate today was 1 US dollar to about 6 Chinese yuans. 31, euro, a single currency shared by many countries that belong to the European Union. Example, the euro is the official currency in countries such as France, Spain, and Germany. 32, specialization, a method of production where a country focuses on the production of a limited scope of products in order to gain greater degrees of efficiency. Example, specialization is the basis of global trade. So pause here for a second. Specialization is really talking about what countries or cities or regions or states are known for producing. So if you think about Michigan, one thing that Michigan is very well known for is specializing in automobiles, in cars. Lastly, 33, interdependence. The condition when countries are dependent on each other for products they cannot produce efficiently for themselves. Example, interdependence happens as a result of specialization. I'm going to scroll down to the PowerPoint notes numbers here, and I will zoom out on my screen so that you guys can see both pages, PowerPoint notes 1 and 2. If you do not have the handout here, please just pause the video at this time and copy down these questions on a separate piece of paper. Give yourself some room to write answers in below, and you can use that instead of having to print out a handout. All right, let's start with question 1 from your handout. And we already covered part of this, so hopefully this is a quick review. Why do we usually use money instead of trading goods for goods? I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds. I'll put a timer up here, and then we'll talk about it. Time's up. So let's think about this for a second. Money has value. Okay, we've got $1 bills, $5 bills, tens, 20s, so on and so forth. So money acts as a placeholder for the value of the good that you want. So let's say you go into a restaurant and you order a meal that costs $10. And you say to the waitress or waiter, well, I don't have any cash, but the shirt I'm wearing is worth $10. So I'll give you my shirt for this meal. That doesn't really work, right? Because the waitress and the restaurant can't take your shirt and go trade it for something that they need, say more food to make more meals. Okay. But if you give them a $10 bill or $10 worth of money, they can then use that to go purchase goods that they need for future meals. So we use money as a placeholder for the value of the goods that we want rather than trading good for good. Plus, it would be kind of weird if you walked into a restaurant and offered somebody your shirt for food. All right, let's look at question two really quick here. The question's asking you, what do we see on this slide? I think right away we all would agree that we're looking at money, all different kinds of money, right? Money from countries all around the world. So we need to think to ourselves, okay, if every country has their own type of money or own currency, how might that affect global trade? And if we think back to some of the word cards we read earlier, we looked at different types of money, like the euro was an example. Not all countries' currency or money has the same value, but we do allow people to exchange money. So we have exchange rates, and that allows people to measure the currencies of different countries against their own. What you need to think about here is how do we place value on different monies from different countries. We look at things like the strength of the country's economy. We look at how much they produce. We call that gross domestic product. Okay, so keep that in mind that not all countries' currency has the same value, and that does play into global trade. All right, so moving on to question number three, then, is global trade something new? If we've got all of this money from all these different countries around the world, is the idea of trading globally something new? I'd like you to give some evidence for your answer as well. A big hint for you guys is take a look at the tag on your shirt or the tag in your shoes and just take note of where those were made. Go ahead and pause here really quick while you write your answer down, and then hit play when you're ready to go. Okay, so while you guys were working on that, I went and grabbed a pair of my Nike shoes. And I look at the tag in here and I see that it's made in Vietnam. Nike's kind of a newer company, relatively newer company. Completely different company is my sweatshirt, Under Armour. And the tag in there also says made in Vietnam. So two goods, different companies, both produced in Vietnam that we here in the United States as consumers buy. So that makes me think to myself, if I were to answer this question right now, I would say yes, global trade is a relatively new thing because we see more of it with newer companies. And when I think about transportation, like boats and planes, those are kind of newer technologies. And we think of communication like cell phones and email and the internet and e commerce. That's all relatively new as well. So I would argue that yes, global trade is something new. However, there's a catch. People have been trading globally for thousands of years. So let's take a look. Okay, so this animation is showing you guys the expansion of global trade from 3500 BCE to 1500 CE. So we're looking at a span of about 5,000 years. And I'll play this back again for you guys really quick. You can see that we're looking at trade starting in the Middle East and then expanding throughout Southern Asia, into Africa, and Europe over that span of 5,000 years. So that graphic was what was called the known world. Before the age of exploration, around 1500 CE, the known world, quote unquote, consisted of Africa, Asia, and Europe. And we see that trade as soon as civilizations began to form and grow, that trade expanded out through that known world. So by 1500, people in China could use the Silk Road to trade goods with people in Western Europe and Northern Africa. And the reasons these people traded are the same reasons that we trade today. They have goods that they've specialized in or they've produced a surplus of, and they know that they can sell them for money. And on the flip side, other people have goods that they want or we would want today that we can use money to buy. Okay. The difference, though, from that graphic to today is how trade has changed because trading itself has changed drastically. All right, so let's take a look and see how this trade has changed here. In the modern day, the speed of trade has increased drastically, like I said before. We can buy things online now in just a couple clicks of our thumb on our cell phone, right? So there's not even these massive transactions that need to take place where we're bartering back and forth on price. The speed at which we can conduct our trade is really really fast. The volume of goods that we can trade, so how much we can actually export, how much we can actually import, is massive. The geographic range, so how far we can trade our goods, guys, we have jets that can go all over the world. So technically, we could trade everywhere in the world. The diversity of goods. This is a really cool one. So 700 years ago, or even 500 years ago, or even 200 years ago, if we were to have grocery stores in our city or our state 200 years ago, the only products in those stores would be goods that were maybe grown here in Lansing area, or goods that were produced here in Lansing area, and we wouldn't have access to any other goods from around the country or around the world. Okay, but nowadays we can just go into the grocery store and we can buy fruits from all over the world and vegetables from all over the world and meat and all sorts of different things that have come from all over the world. So the diversity of goods has grown. And lastly, trade has become really, really complex. Okay, we've got lots of different countries trading lots of different goods, buying and selling those goods, exporting those goods, importing other goods, and all of these countries have different currencies and different value to their money. So that makes things kind of complex. So, what's caused these changes? Well, we talked about this earlier, the improvement in communication. Okay, obviously now we can hop on our cell phone and we can text people, we can email people, we can call people, we can FaceTime people, we can Zoom with people all over the world, and it's in a matter of seconds. Also, improvements in transportation. 500 years ago, you would have had to load all of your goods onto a wagon or onto a sailboat, and you'd have to travel for weeks, maybe months, just to get your goods to where you wanted to sell them and buy new goods. Nowadays, we can load all that stuff onto jets and cargo ships and have them anywhere we want in the world within days. So here's an example of one of those container ships that we were just looking at before. And when we talk about the betterment of transportation, this is one of them. So each of these containers up here on this ship is this size, 8 feet by 20 feet by 8 feet tall. Okay, we call it 1 TEU, or 20-foot equivalent unit. So one of these crates is 1 TEU. Now notice this ship is carrying, we can't even count how many TEUs are on this ship. But what you may not have noticed is the loaded ship in front of it, and then another loaded ship off in the distance here. So the sheer volume and the speed that we can trade all of these goods in these TEUs is kind of unfathomable. So if we look at the evolution of container ships, early container ships were only carrying about 500 to 800 of those TEUs. And when we talk about early container ships, we're talking within the last 70 years. Container ships today, 18,000 TEUs. Okay, so going from 500 to 18,000 of these containers within 70 years. So again, we're seeing massive changes in the way we trade. Not why, but the way we trade. So let's move on to question number 4. Who do you think we here in the US trade with the most? Who are the top 5 trading partners? Please pause the video here, write down your 5 ideas, and when you're all done, hit play and we'll keep going. Okay, answers to the top 5 trading partners in the US. Number 1 is Canada, believe it or not. And I think a lot of us probably would have put a different country up here. We'll talk about that one in a second. But Canada is at the top, and that actually makes sense because the United States and Canada share one of the largest borders in the world, and most people in Canada live within 100 miles of that US border. So you've got a lot of people living relatively close to the border. There's going to be a lot of trading of goods between the two. Number 2 is China. And when we think about this one, it makes sense. I mean, everything that we see pretty much says made in China, or at least it seems like it says it's made in China. That goes from, backpacks to pencil bags to hydro flasks to cell phones. I mean, you name it. Okay. Number 3 is Mexico, and this one makes sense too because Mexico is on the United States southern border. So again, we've got a country with a relatively large population. We've got Mexico City there as well, which is one of the largest cities in North America. And it makes sense that we would trade heavily with Mexico because they border the United States. Number 4 is Japan. Okay, so all the way across the Pacific Ocean, but a lot of our electronic goods come from Japan. So we import a lot from Japan. Lastly, Germany. And this one at first is kind of a head scratcher. It's like, what, Germany? Why is that top 5 trading with the US? But think about it. We have cars here that have been imported, like Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen, and those are German-made automobiles. Okay, so it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So what we're talking about with trading partners are exports and imports. And this is a quick review from the last lesson. Exports are sending products to another country for sale. So we produce something here and we send it out for sale. And imports, we bring products into our country to be sold to consumers. Okay, so example of exports in the United States, maybe fruits and vegetables. Examples of imports to the United States would be oil. So that leads us to question number 5. Now, this map looks wacky, and it is, but we've seen cartograms like this before, or maps like this before, where we're showing countries that are really big based on whatever the prompt or question is. So, for example, here our question is, what export do you think this shows? So the countries that look bloated or really big, like the United States and Western Europe, these countries are exporting a specific type of good. When you look at Latin America and the Caribbean here, or Africa here, or the South Pacific, and even Japan over here, these countries that are looking tiny or shrunk, they're not exporting this good. So, question 5, what do you think this shows? Pretty tough guess, but it's actually cereals. So wheat, rice, barley, corn. We export a ton of those here in the United States. Question 6, you guys can just choose one of these to copy down. What are other major U.S. exports? Some big ones here in the U.S. We produce lots of civilian aircraft, aircraft engines, jet engines, other aircraft parts, fuel oil and petroleum products, as well as passenger cars and other vehicle parts. And the third one makes a lot of sense, especially for us in Michigan, with Detroit being so close, and we think of Ford and GM. All right, we're on to PowerPoint Notes page 2, and we're going to hustle through this page a little bit quicker than we did the first one. We're kind of getting into more of the activities portion of the lesson. So I'd like you to just copy down one of the answers for question number 7 as we go through this here. Why do countries export goods? So what's the reason countries send goods out? Well, more goods are being produced than the country needs, so they might have a surplus of those goods and they sell the rest for money. Goods can be sold to other countries at higher prices than if we sold them domestically. And this one makes sense too. We can charge more for goods that we've produced here because other countries may not be able to produce those goods, or they may not have access to those goods, so they're willing to pay more money for those goods. Goods can be sold in order to earn foreign currency, which can be used to purchase imports. And then lastly, selling exports can increase levels of employment. And this makes sense because you need people to work, and you need to employ people to work on the exporting process. So go ahead and pause the video here, choose one of these to copy down for your answer, and then hit play when you're ready to go. Okay, so what we're looking at with exports is countries specializing in goods and using those specialized goods to trade. So for question 8, we have another cartogram, but this time we're looking at imports. So the countries that are really big are importing this good. We see the United States, the United Kingdom, Western Europe. Check out Japan over here. Okay, these countries are importing a good. So what good do you think that is? If you guessed clothing, you'd be right. Okay, and when we look at the countries that aren't importing clothes, you'll see in a second here that those are the countries exporting clothes. So check out China and a lot of the countries in Southern Asia and the South Pacific, and check out India. Those are countries that are producing clothing and exporting them to these countries. So we have imports, exports, imports, exports. So that brings us to one of the biggest questions of the lesson. Question number 9. And after I read through this, I'd like you to pause, fill out your answer, and then hit play when you're ready to go. So do you agree or disagree? We import clothes in the United States because we aren't capable of making clothes in the US. Agree or disagree? Explain your answer. Please pause here and get something written down. Okay, so while you guys were filling out your answer here, I ran upstairs to my closet and I went through all my clothes, and I was really surprised that a lot of the tags in my clothes said made in places like Cambodia and Indonesia and Bangladesh. And I didn't really see a whole lot of tags that said made in the USA. It's interesting. And it made me think to myself, why would we not be producing clothes here in the United States when we've got the third largest population in the world? People need clothes. We've got to buy clothes. So why wouldn't we produce those? Let's take a look. All right, and this graphic explains it all to us. How much does it cost to make a denim shirt in Bangladesh versus the United States? Okay, and so when we compare the two, we have the United States cost on the left and the Bangladesh cost on the right. And you can see the total cost here is $13.22 to make a denim shirt in the United States versus $3.72 in Bangladesh. And when we look at the industrial laundry and the materials, they're relatively close to the same price, just a little bit more expensive in the United States. But what we have down here called labor costs, the amount that we pay our workers, we see here in the United States that on average labor costs $7.47 versus 22 cents in Bangladesh. So the reason we don't produce a lot of clothes here, we buy them from other countries, is because it costs more for us to produce clothing here than it would be for us to import it from other countries. Aha. So what are other major US imports? So what are other major US imports here for question number 10? You can just copy one of these down as we go through this. So we can see that the United States is big time importing this good. The country that's exporting it, China. And this is an example of toys, okay? So a big import for the US would be toys. We buy tons of toys from China. Another example of an import to the US, exported from Japan, and we see this as being like Western Europe. Cars. We buy tons of cars. Think about Toyota and Honda and some of the ones we listed earlier. Mercedes Benz or Volkswagen. Those are imported cars. Another example of an import to the United States from places like Japan and Mexico, electronics, so our TVs and our video game systems. Question 11, why do countries import? And again, just copy one of these down as I go through them. Countries want goods that are essential but not available in the domestic market. So we need those goods, but they may not be readily available in the country that maybe we live in. Countries want goods that are highly desired but not available in the domestic market. Maybe there's just something that's super popular out there, but we don't produce it. Okay, so we're going to import it instead. Countries want goods that can be produced cheaper or more efficiently by another country. And that's where clothing comes in. Clothing is produced more cheaply in other countries. So we might as well buy it from them than produce it here. Which leads us to question 11. Where do you think Levi jeans are made? Now, Levi's are a United States company. Okay, Levi's originated in the United States, specifically in the West, during like the gold rush and the time of mining out west, and they were produced for miners or invented for miners and farm workers as like a rugged, rough pant. So we would think that Levi jeans are made in the United States. However, all Levi jeans are made outside America with one exception. There's a single line of jeans called the Levi's 501 that you can see here in the image, and that is produced at a factory called White Oak in Greensboro, North Carolina. So what once started as an American-made pant for rugged American Westerners is now produced in other parts of the world. And that's what your activity extension is on with Levi jeans. You guys will map out where that's produced and how it's produced in Asia. All right, so the last part of your lesson here is the final page on your handout called Trade Data in the year 2013. And I'm going to share my screen with you really quick so you guys can take a look at it. Here we go. So we've got trade data for 2013. You can see that there is a chart here. You guys will be analyzing this chart and answering questions 1 through 6 on this sheet. You will also be using this sheet to answer the questions on our Google survey. So please do not forget to fill out the Google survey, just letting us know kind of where you are with everything with the trade data and why countries trade. There is also, like I said before in the lesson, an extension activity on Levi jeans that's on our website. Feel free to print that out and fill that out. You also have the opportunity to do a current event again this week. That also is an extension of voluntary activity for you guys. However, we love to see what you guys are reading and watching with the news. So on that note, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We've got 1 week left of continued learning. So I'm looking forward to seeing you then.